Jadi ini show stream di YouTube nih.
Cek audio panitia. Kamu cek. Donald.
Ya, kan boleh, ya boleh ini ya. Yuk.
Ada apa dengar, Roger?
Siap, ada.
Oke.
Oh ya.
Tinggal tunggu speaker, Kang.
Ya.
Rakit.
Gambar masuk ya. Ada virtual background Pak kita.
Ada, Kang.
Roger, pembawa acara tidak bisa unmute.
Hi Donald, good to see you.
Ini enggak, cuma DP halus di bawah. Yang pernah kita enter pengantin enggak pernah, cuma kita.
Good afternoon, Rakit.
Good afternoon, Donald. Very good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, nice to see you again. I'm doing fine.
Good to see you.
Yeah. So. Sudah. Okay. Maya semua mulai, boleh? Atau? Oke. MC sudah bisa dimulai.
MC sementara coba masuk lagi dari link host.
Oh. Iya.
Sebelum mulai itu ini.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to say sorry before because there's a technical problem. And welcome to the public lecture of Samratulangi University, Faculty of Humanities. The public lecture entitled Writing a Research Design for University Students will give the answer of our question. In our public lecture today, we will have several sessions. The first one is opening prayer. Then we will have the report from the head of the committee, Sir Donald R. Lotulung, SS Umum. And then we're going to hear the opening remark from Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Andes Ferry Raymond Mawikere, Umum, MA. And after that, we'll have speaker introduction from moderator, Pamela Loindong, SS Umum. And after that, material presentation of public lecture by speaker Dr. Rakib Kuhuduri from Monash University. Then we'll have Q&A or discussion session, and after that, closing remark by Secretary of Committee Stephanie Sigalaki, SS Umum. And the last session will be photo session. And before we begin, I would like to read several rules for today. The first one is please turn on your camera during the public lecture until the end. And then please be sure that your audio is turned off or in mute mode. And the presence code will be given by operator in the middle of this public lecture. And if you have any technical difficulties, please type in the chat box. And before we begin our public lecture today, allow me to lead us in prayer according to my belief. Our Father, which art in heaven, thank you for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you that you still give us help and we are able to join this public lecture today. Please guide us, guide the speaker and all the participants so our public lecture today will be fruitful for us. Thank you, Jesus. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And now we are going to hear the report from the head of the committee, Sir Donald R. Lotulung SS Umum. The floor is yours, sir, please.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, namo buddhaya, Om Swastiastu, salam kebajikan. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Andes Ferry Raymond Mawikere, Umum, MA, the Honorable, the Speaker of this public lecture, Dr. Rakib Chowdhury from Monash University, and my beloved colleagues, students, and participants. Firstly, as humans, we should thanks to the Almighty God because of His bless and love, so we can be here together in following this public lecture, which held by the Faculty of Humanities, Samratulangi University, entitled Writing a Research Design for University Students. It is held today, Thursday, 3rd of June, 2021. As the committee, we are very grateful and we would like to convey our gratitude to the speaker of this public lecture, Dr. Rakib Chowdhury, because in the middle of his busy day, he willingly able to take time in sharing his knowledge about how to write a research design for university students. In this public lecture, we have invited lecturers and students from other institutions to get knowledge and insight regarding to write a research design, in particular, the writing of research design for university students. And right now have been registered 254 participants who are interested to join this public lecture. And this public lecture can be followed through the Zoom application and YouTube as well. hoping that the all participants who are joining this public lecture will be able to implement their knowledge in writing or research and can increase their want to doing research to be written and published. Of course, during the preparation, we have faced many obstacles, but we can overcome them all. It is because of the good teamwork and mutual assistance of all committee. Once again, thank you to all committee for this good teamwork in preparing and running this public lecture. And after this, I would like to invite the Dean of Faculty of Humanities to open this public lecture officially. That's all the report of me as the head of the committee. Happy following this public lecture, and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your report. And then we're going to hear opening remark from Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Andes Ferry Mawikere, Umum, MA. The floor is yours, sir, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Honorable Speaker, committee and participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At this precious moment, let us first express our gratitude to the merciful God, who has granted us with blessing and grace that we could gather here today, virtually, to attend the public lecture made by Faculty of Humanity, I think, Samratulangi University. As a dean, let I extend my warmest greeting and welcome to our distinguished speaker, the handsome Mr. Dr. Ralph Chuduri. Yeah, the expertise ESL test from Faculty of Education, Monash University, for being here virtually with us and giving valuable materials about how to write a proposal design, a research design. A nice topic for university students. To the participants, particularly to all university students, I also would like to express my appreciation. I believe that this topic would give insight to the audience and broaden to know of all of us. In this opportunity, I also pleased to thank and appreciate the hard working of the committee. They are the head, Donald Lotulung, academic vice dean, my academic vice dean, Maya Pinkan Waro, PhD, the student called Mami. Also, the nice moderator, Pamela Lumoendong Umum. So this public lecture will be held today, will be held this time. And finally, I want to say welcome to everyone and wish all the participants a productive discussion throughout the topic. I also hope that you may enjoy this lecture. Thank you. God bless us. Please take Pamela, nice moderator.
Thank you for our Dean, who has already officially opened our public lecture for today, and now we'll hear a speaker's introduction from moderator Pamela Loindong, SS and Co. Please, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adele. Now I would like to introduce our honorable speaker for today's public lecture, entitled Writing a Research Design for University Students. The honorable speaker for today is Dr. Rakib Kauduri. He is a senior lecturer from Faculty of Education, Monash University, Australia. Dr. Rakib completed his bachelor's degree with honors at University of Dhaka in August 1994. And then he completed his master's degree, or MA, at University of Dhaka in December 1995. And he completed his second master's degree with major in TESOL at Monash University, or MED. He got the title MED in July 2001. After that, he completed his doctorate degree with areas of specialization in international education, higher education, globalization, TESOL and ELP, EFL and ESL, and EAP pedagogy. Among many of his notable achievements and qualifications, he was accredited research supervisor at Monash Institute of Graduate Research in 2010. Now, please welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Rakib Kauduri from Monash University. Please.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Please thumbs up if you can hear me. Just wanted to make sure the technicalities are all taken care of. Thank you. And next I'll share the screen before I get started. So once again, if you can put your thumbs up to make sure you can see the screen. Okay, thank you, Pamela. All right, good afternoon from Melbourne, Australia. It's my great pleasure and privilege to be here once again, getting involved in a public seminar with the Faculty of Humanities, Samratulangi University. I'm saying once again because some of you would remember, such as Professor Golda Tulung, who is here as well, that I was at Samratulangi University in Manado exactly 2 years ago, in June, the first week of June, in fact, 2019. So 2 years ago, I was there, and I'm sure there are people in the audience who were there at my public lectures 2 years ago in campus. So it's my great pleasure and privilege to be back once again. I would like to acknowledge, first of all, Mr. Donald Lotulung, head of committee, for inviting me to deliver this public lecture. I'd also like to thank my own PhD student, Dr. Maya Waro, the Vice Dean of the faculty, otherwise known as Mummy, as Dr. Ferry pointed out. It's great to see Maya once again. Maya is one of my most highly accomplished PhD student, and it was at her invitation that I visited Samratulangi University in 2019. I'd also like to acknowledge the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Ferry Malikere, and of course, the moderator of the program, Ms. Pamela Loindong, and the moderator and the secretary of the committee, Ms. Stephanie Sigalaki. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Maya wanted me to run the presentation for 1 hour, and I said, it's too long, let's do half an hour. But this morning, while I was preparing the presentation, I realized I actually needed more time. So I said, Maya, I'll need more than 30 minutes. And she said, oh, don't worry about it. We will make adjustments And luckily, we've also started about 15 minutes ahead of time. So hopefully, I will not have to rush a lot. But just once again, thank you very much. A great pleasure to be here. There are a number of slides, and some of these I will not spend a lot of time on. Some of these I will skip very quickly. But there are two reasons why I'm still including these slides. One is to provide us a better context of the overall thesis within which the research design is located, so to give us the context. And the second reason is I will make the PowerPoint available through Maya and Donald so that it can be made available, it can be sent to everyone attending this seminar, so you can use it as a resource. So once again, I will skip through some of the slides, or I'll pass through them very quickly for these two reasons. However, the main topic of this seminar is writing a research design, otherwise known as the methodology, for university students. So it could be, you could be an undergraduate student or a graduate student doing a bachelor's or a master's thesis, perhaps even a PhD. Basically, the mechanics and the structure of writing a research design are more or less the same, regardless of what level you are at. So just a quick look at what we will be covering in the next 30 minutes or so. I will start with a general background of doing research in social sciences, and social sciences includes education, language and linguistics. It is quite cross-disciplinary, it is quite interdisciplinary. So that would include all of humanities. You being in the Faculty of Humanities, it will apply to all of you. So understanding social sciences research. I will then talk about three fundamental concepts in order to understand the main topic. These are theory, conceptual framework, and theoretical framework. We will then look at the different components of a thesis, but our main focus would be on the research design chapter. So the methodology or the research design chapter. And within that chapter, I'll be talking about three aspects. One is the structure and the function of this chapter. The second one is the mechanics of writing. So some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we want to write the research approach or the study design chapter. And finally, I will also talk about some of the common issues or problems that you're likely to experience when you're writing your methodology or study design. By the way, methodology and study design, I'm using these terms interchangeably because they are more or less the same thing. So this is the main focus of the study. The rest is just, you know, the broader context or the broader canvas, but not the main focus. So here's the first slide. We have 6 or 7 definitions of research. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them all, and you don't have to read them all either. The point I'm trying to make here is if you look at, you know, across these 6 or 7 definitions, the highlighted words, if you look at the highlighted words, it's all about systematic, disciplined, systematic and discipline, and systematic and disciplined. So in other words, when we talk about research, when we talk about academic research, regardless of how it is defined by different people, one thing that is common and one thing that is fundamental to research, academic research, is that it needs to be disciplined and systematic. And one of the reasons why, or one of the ways in which academic research can be systematic or can be made systematic is through the methodology, which is the topic of today's public lecture. At Monash University, this is how we define research. And here too, you can see the value of methodology. Research is contributing to new knowledge or using existing knowledge in new and creative ways to generate new concepts and methodologies, among other things. So in other words, methodology is not just a section in your thesis. Methodology itself can be in the form of contribution. So when you write a thesis, Don't just analyze the data coming from interviews. Also think about some kind of innovation through your study design. So some of the common elements in social and educational research. So this is some of the things that we need to do when we do social sciences research. We need to conduct a review of literature, which means we need to acknowledge what has already been done, what is already known, previous knowledge. We need to use concepts and theories. We need to formulate research questions. And then all of these four things, they're related to today's topic. Formulating the methodology, collecting data, whether it is qualitative or quantitative, we need to collect data, otherwise it can't be an empirical study. Analyzing the data, and finally writing about the data or the research findings, and that's what we will talk about. So here are the definitions, the three foundational definitions that we need to understand in order to know how to write the methodology and how the methodology is related to the other parts of your thesis or the other parts of your proposal. So if I ask my PhD students at Monash University, including those who are in their final year of PhD doctoral studies, hey, what is a theory? They will give you really nice answers. They will give you really good answers, but they will not be able to give you, some of them will not be able to give you a straightforward, simple, easy to understand response. But for me, theory is really easy to understand. So take a look at this definition, which comes from one of my publications in 2019. And I will make this article available to you by sending it to Donald. So a theory is an explanation of a particular phenomenon, which means anything that you're researching that has been established through evidence from a research or evidence-based study. In other words, it can be a statement that explicates or explains how and why things happen in a particular way. So pretty much any statement or definition that you borrow from an article, from a journal article, if you use it in your own research, that is a theory. It's pretty simple. What about a theoretical framework? I want you to read this very quickly, and then I'll just explain what a framework is. If you're writing a thesis, you need a theoretical framework, not just a literature review. A theoretical framework is the outcome or the result of your literature review. It happens after you've finished reviewing. And that's why I'm saying it's the outcome. So take a look at what I'm saying here. A theoretical framework is a logical synthesis, which means bringing things together of multiple theories. What are theories? I explained in the previous slide. So you bring in these theories together in a synthesis whose congruence is coherent. Coherent means it makes sense in explaining phenomena or reality, which is your topic. It can be said that a theoretical framework is a system of concepts. So the concepts are the theories, and the framework is the system, and a particular combination of theories that can combine to provide a tool that explains reality. Reality means whatever the topic, you know, your research question. So that's a theoretical framework, and it comes at the end of your literature review. What about conceptual framework? If you have a theoretical framework in your thesis, what you have in your proposal is a conceptual framework, because when you're writing a proposal, you still haven't collected data. You still haven't got, you haven't interviewed the participants. You still don't know what the findings are. All you have is a plan for doing the research, which is your methodology. And all you have is previous studies. So you cannot come up with a theoretical framework while you're doing your proposal. And that is where the conceptual framework comes in. It is sometimes based on existing theories, but more importantly, it is something that is based on logic, reason, and intuition. And this is something that later on develops into a theoretical framework. So now I'm giving you the broader picture. That's why I'm talking about theories and all of that. So here is another dimension of the broader picture. I'm sure you've heard about STEM and HES. So these are the two broad categories of higher education studies. So think about disciplines. So some of you are doing language, ELT, linguistics, TESOL, education, applied linguistics, sociolinguistics. So these are all disciplines. So all of these disciplines can be divided into two broad areas. One is STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So together they are also known as natural sciences. And this is humanities, which is the faculty that you are from, most of you. Humanities, arts, and social sciences, and that includes education and all of that. So there is a big reason why there is a division between these two big clusters, and that is in STEM or natural sciences, knowledge is based on positivism. So in my next slide, I will explain what ontology and epistemology are. So positivism means, can anyone tell me what this means? Anyone here? This is like an acronym. You can turn on your mic and tell me what you think this refers to. We see wig. What does it mean? We see wig. What you see is what you get, right? So this means there is no role of interpretation. So think about natural sciences, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So it is a biologist looking through the lens of a microscope. It is a chemist working through litmus and chemical reaction. It is a botanist looking at the pollination of flowers. It's a mathematician looking through formulas. It is a physicist looking at how magnetism works. So the observable reality is what you see. So what you see is what you get. You cannot interpret natural and scientific facts in 2 or 3 different ways. That is positivism. It is what it is. That is what you see is what you get. On the other hand, for us, humanities, social sciences, and arts, if you observe a classroom, if you observe a teacher behavior or student behavior, 4 different researchers will come up with 4 different interpretations based on the theories that they're using. It can never be the same. And that is why what you see is not what you get, and we call this constructivism. And the reason I'm talking about positivism and constructivism is because in social sciences, in HES, humanities, methodology gives you more choices. It can be more subjective than in natural sciences, where there might not be too many choices. You are bound by the natural forces. You are bound by the logistics. You are bound by the theories. And therefore, we have to be more careful in choosing our research approach or methodology, research design for social sciences. So this positivism and constructivism are what we know as ontology and epistemology. There are 2 ontologies and 2 epistemologies. Ontology is what is reality, and epistemology is how do we know reality. And connected to these 2 concepts, next comes paradigm, which is kind of related to the theoretical framework. As I said, theoretical framework is about combining or synthesizing multiple theories together in a coherent way so that it can answer your research questions. So 2 thesis writers using the same theories, reading the same journal articles, answering the same research questions might come up with two different, completely different theoretical frameworks, which is not possible in STEM or in natural sciences, but in social sciences, it is possible. So that's where the paradigm comes in. So if you look at the hierarchy of ideas, it starts with ontology, and then epistemology, and then paradigm. So you have your research questions and the theoretical framework. And then next is methodology, which is what we are doing today. And then after methodology, or within methodology, we have methods. So what I'm trying to show you now is the context of the research design, which is this methodology, in relation to the other sections or the other functions of the thesis. How does it sit there? Now, those of you who have written a thesis or are writing a thesis, you know that whether it is a proposal or whether it is a thesis, the methodology or the research design structurally sits in the middle, right? It sits in the middle. So at the beginning, we have the introduction and the lit review. And at the end, we have analysis and discussion and conclusion. So the methodology is in the middle. So strategically speaking, the methodology's job is to make connections between the first half of the thesis and the last half of the thesis. So in other words, it has to connect the theoretical framework and the research questions with the analysis and the discussion. That's why it's in the middle. And this, what you're seeing on the screen right now, shows that logical hierarchy of how one is related to the other. Now, I'm going to talk about methodology and methods a bit more in a following slide, but this is just to show you the relationship. Now, this is just a summary of what I've already explained. Positivism and interpretivism. So positivism is natural sciences like physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, mathematics, etc. on the left-hand side. And interpretivism is us, it is humanities, arts, and social sciences. And as I said, methodologically, they are very different. They give us different choices. We need to understand that. Now, these two epistemologies, positivism and interpretivism, they correspond to two different methodological approaches. So positivism is usually quantitative studies, or rather I should say quantitative studies are usually positivist. And qualitative studies are usually constructivist. In other words, in social sciences, you are likely to do qualitative studies rather than quantitative studies, or the combination of these two, which is called mixed method study. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do a quantitative study in education or in humanities. Of course you can, but if you do that, you are less likely to be interpretivist or constructivist. It will be a positivist study because you are crunching numbers. You are representing findings in terms of percentages and Likert scale and yes, no, and graphs and tables and charts. There is no human agency here. You're not talking about interpretation. You're not talking about subjectivities. You're not talking about identities. You're not talking about idiosyncratic behavior of individuals. These are things that you can only get from interviews, which is a qualitative method, not a quantitative method. So this is the third option where you can mix qualitative and quantitative together, and it is called mixed method study. In humanities, mixed method studies are still primarily qualitative. They begin with quantitative, such as a survey with a bigger number of participants, and then it narrows down to a smaller number of participants who are then interviewed, or they participate in focus group discussions, or they're observed, and that's the qualitative element. So it's kind of, it sort of supplements or complements each other, the qualitative and the quantitative. And this is gaining more and more popularity, mixed methods research. So here is my summary of this first part of my presentation, which is showing the hierarchy and the relationship of ontology, epistemology, paradigm, and then the next two, methods and methodology, and then methods. So when we talk about research methodology, research, Pamela, there are questions and raising hands by Priscilla. If you can take notes for anyone who is writing questions, I can answer them after I've finished, Pamela. Thank you. Someone has just raised her hand. Okay. So the research methodology or the study design, what we call the study design or the research design, is the overall plan of how research will be conducted. So it includes the assumptions, logic, principles, and procedures involved in the production of knowledge. Together, these amount to your position in relation to validity and reliability. So examples of methodology are case study. So case study is not a method, because a method is a tool that you can use to collect data. You cannot collect data using case studies. Your study itself can be a case study. So that's the methodology overall design. And the method is only a part of the methodology. So methodology is the bigger term, and the method is one part of your methodology, which is the tool or the techniques or the procedures such as interviews, observations, surveys. There is a whole lot of methods that we can use. So once again, just to summarize, methodology is the same as research design. It is the overall plan of action, how you will collect data, how you will recruit participants, how you will analyze data, how you will ensure research ethics, how you will take care of things like power relations and conflicts of interests, validity, reliability, trustworthiness, credibility, transferability. These are all these smaller elements of that big design called methodology. And method is one part of methodology. It is what you actually do or administer or conduct in order to get data such as interviews or observations. Now, this one is kind of self-explanatory, so I will not go into explaining it in a lot of detail because this is pretty much a template for you to use. So those of you who are doing research, those of you who are collecting data, those of you who are writing a proposal, you can use this template to decide by answering these questions which methods you might use to address the research purposes. So in other words, your methodology and your methods would be dependent on the aims and the research questions of your project. It is not intuitive. Sometimes we think it is intuitive. For example, whatever I want to do, I just need to talk to people. I just need to talk to people and I'll get the answer. No, it is also about deciding how many people you need to talk to. Would the interviews be semi-structured, unstructured? Would they be individual or would they be a group discussion, such as a focus group discussion? In what order? Where you will be interviewing them? Are there any power relations, for example? If you do it at school, it's one kind of dynamic. If you do it in a restaurant having a coffee, that's a different kind of dynamic. If you are a teacher and you are asking your student to come to your office room and do an interview that has power relations that will influence what they will tell you, they might be nervous. So you're not getting data. Validity, reliability. So your choice of methods is not intuitive. It has to be well-informed. And these are some of the questions that can help you determine what kind of methods you might use to address the research purposes. Now, if you want to get a summary and a very easy to understand explanation of all of the things that I've explained so far, from ontology to epistemology, methods, methodology, theory, theoretical framework, conceptual framework, then you can read this article. It is open access. It is available online. All you have to do is click on the link and you can download it. It is free. There is a short link as well. So if you go to your browser and if you type this, it will take you to that link. You can download the PDF and you will find, all the definitions that I provided from my article. They are from this article, the definitions of theory, theoretical framework, and all of that. So feel free to download and use it in your work. I wrote it for first-year PhD students, but even if you're doing an undergraduate degree, you will still find it easy to understand because I've used very accessible language so that you are not intimidated by thinking, oh my God, I don't know what a theoretical framework is. I don't need it. I just need to pass and forget about it. So it's written, I promise it is written in easy language. So I invite you to take a look at this. So now we're moving on to the second part of the presentation. And now we are looking at the, the overall structure of a typical thesis. So I want you to look at these 6 sections and try to match them with what you're doing in your proposal, or some of you are writing a thesis, some of you have written a thesis. Maya has already completed her PhD thesis. So you are all more or less familiar with the structure. So if you're thinking about the chapters of your thesis, how do they align with these 6 sections? These are functional sections. So I want you to take a quick look and tell me if this is what you're doing, or what you're doing is different, or if there is a different expected structure at Samratulangi University. All right, so as you can see, there are 6 main sections, and these sections more or less correspond to the 6 chapters in a thesis. However, the findings can sometimes have more than 1 chapter. The discussion and conclusion, usually always 1 chapter. Methodology, 1 chapter. The literature review can be 2 chapters. And if you have 2 chapters, the second chapter is likely to be the chapter that talks about the theoretical framework. Remember what I said, everyone? The theoretical framework is the outcome of your literature review. So it comes at the end. After you have finished the review, it comes at the end. So you can split it into 2 chapters, literature review and theoretical framework. But look at this colored, red colored section here, methodology, which is what we are looking at. As you remember, a little while ago, I said that structurally, methodology sits in the middle of a thesis. So we have these 3 sections after, and we have these 2 sections in the front. And in order to maintain the continuity, the job of the methodology section or the research design section is to make sure it makes explicit connections between these chapters and these chapters. And I will show you examples of how that can be done. Once again, I will send the table of contents of my PhD thesis to Donald and Maya, and you can have a look at it. And by the way, Dr. Maya Waro, my PhD student at Monash University, has written a brilliant thesis. And I also encourage you to look at Mami Maya Waro's PhD thesis. It's a very good thesis. All right, so in the next few slides, the next 4 or 5 slides, I will not talk much. I will just leave it on the screen so that you can take a look, because I am now only going to look at the different components, the different sections that make up each of these chapters. So for example, the next slide would be the introduction chapter. And the slide after that would be the review of literature chapter. And within that chapter, I will show you, like a checklist of items and the sequence in which they should be written. But because the topic of today's discussion is methodology, with the other 4 sections, I don't want to spend much time. So I'll just show you, and then I will pause, and then I'll go to the next slide. And then finally, I will concentrate on the methodology chapter itself. And then after that, the last section of my presentation would be some of the mechanics of writing and the common errors that we make. So we start with the first one, which is the introduction or the background and context. And this is how the chapter looks like in terms of its sections. So just take a look. You can take a photo if you want, but it can work as a kind of checklist for you to check your own writing and make adjustments if needed. And if you have any questions, guys, you can just put it in the chat box, or you can send it to Pamela, and she can read them out to me. So this is the introduction. Next is the review of literature. Just ignore this tomorrow's workshop because we don't have a tomorrow's workshop, but maybe we can talk about the literature review. If you ask me to do another workshop, I would be happy to do it again. Donald and Maya, maybe we'll leave it for another time, but this is the literature review. The third one is methodology. Now, this is the topic. So today's topic is really about methodology, which I say it is the same as research design. So we are using these 2 words interchangeably. So these are the components that make up, so the sections that make up the research design or the methodology chapter. Usually it is the 3rd chapter, but it can be the 4th chapter as well. So what I'll do is I will now explain some of these individually so that you can just have a better look at what's happening. But what we will do is, let's look at the remaining chapters. So after methodology, the next chapter is data analysis or presentation chapter. Usually in a quantitative study, it is called a presentation chapter. In a qualitative study, it is usually called an analysis chapter. You can also call it a reporting chapter or data reporting chapter. It's all the same. So this is what happens, and this comes after the methodology chapter. Remember, you have to connect this chapter with the literature review chapter through the methodology chapter, because that is right in the middle. Okay. Now, if you look at the highlight, it says theory citations are minimal, which means in the presentation or analysis chapter, we don't talk a lot about the theories, which we discussed in the literature review. We don't do that. Here we have quotes and numbers and statements and paraphrases and stories and narratives from your participants. That's your data. So that's the data chapter. And then we have chapter 5, the discussion chapter. I call it the melting pot chapter. Maya would remember some of these terms that I used while supervising Maya. I call it melting pot because this is where everything happens together. The discussion chapter is usually the most difficult chapter to write. If it's for a PhD, it will just kill you writing this chapter. I know you would all know that. Golda and Maya and Dr. Ferry and everyone else who has done a PhD. This is the chapter where you talk about your research questions, your main theories, your data, your analysis, and then how it aligns with what we already know, what is new, what is not new, what is contradictory, all of these things. And just like in the previous section, I said theories are minimal. In this chapter, data citations are minimal because we don't want to repeat them. You have already discussed about them in the discussion chapter. So this chapter is about seeing the bigger picture, answering the so what question, making references to the theoretical framework and the theories and the research questions. So this is how we are connecting these two. And of course, we have the methodology chapter in the middle. And then finally, we have the conclusion. This is usually the shortest chapter. It doesn't matter whether it's an undergraduate thesis, a master's thesis, or a PhD thesis. It's more or less the same. It's usually small. Now, unlike the STEM disciplines or natural sciences discipline, where you have to be very precise, very specific, and very decisive about your conclusion, in social sciences, your conclusion does not have to generalize or be conclusive. You cannot say that there was a problem, I have solved it, and this is the final solution, full stop. There is nothing else we need to worry about. We cannot say that, because in social sciences, nothing is conclusive. And on one hand, that makes our job easy because we don't have to be very, very precise. But on the other hand, it makes our job very difficult because you still have to be very convincing without even having proven anything. So that's the conclusion. A few other tips on conclusion. It's just a general tip how to write conclusion. And then we move on to methodology. And I have 7-8 minutes. Maya, I'll try to finish on time. Maybe I'll take another 5 or 10 minutes, but I think it should be fine. Okay, so let's move on to methodology now. So what is in our methodology chapter? Remember, methodology is research design. So what do we do in this chapter, which is the third chapter, remember? So I'll give you a second to look at these things, because some of these things you already know. So you can use it as a checklist. So I'll just give you a second to read this. And if you look at these, this shows the connection between the first half of the thesis and the second half of the thesis. So ontology, epistemology, methodology, methods, rationale, validity, reliability, and ethics. And usually this is the sequence according to which we write the methodology chapter. What I will do is in the next slide, not in the next slide, but the slide, the coming up slides, I will show you a list of questions. And when you're writing the research design chapter, if you look at those questions and if you see it as a checklist, it would be very easy for you to make sure you've written a high quality and a really, really convincing methodology chapter, because it is basically a list of everything that you need to do in this chapter. I just want to point out two things here. I mean, again, these are pretty self-explanatory. You will understand it, so there's no point in spending too much time. This chapter contains explanations and descriptions of what? A justification of what has been done. So for example, methodology chapter is where you say, this is a qualitative study, but this is where you also say why it's a qualitative study. Okay? And it also is a reflection on what did not work so well. So for example, you can say, my plan was to have 4 focus groups with 10 students in each group, because it is not possible to interview 40 students individually. So I will call them in 4 groups of, 4 groups of 10 students each. So like a focus group discussion, right? But it didn't work. Why? Because the students didn't care. They don't know how important the research is, or because they are busy, or because it was school holiday. The semester was over. They had an exam. So instead of 4, you only had 2 focus groups, and they only had 6 students together. So the plan was sort of disrupted. You had to make modifications. So you have to reflect on that, and you have to explain how that may have affected the original intention, and whether that compromised the quality of the data or the volume of the data. But most importantly, the function of the study design or the research design chapter is to explain and justify all the methodological choices that you've made, from recruiting participants to interviewing them, collecting data, analyzing data, and how you analyze data and why you analyze data. And then moving on to ethical issues such as power relations. And finally, you talk about the validity or reliability. How do you know the way you've analyzed is correct? How do you know if you want to conduct the same interview again, you will get the same results, reliability. How do you know the semi-structured interview is the correct tool? Validity. So these questions are all housed in the study design or the research design chapter. Now, this is the order of how we explain our choices in the methodology chapter. First, we talk about what. So we say it's a qualitative study or interviews. And then we say why it's a qualitative study, why interviews. And then we say how it's a qualitative study or how you conducted the interview. So this is the logical sequence for every single section within the methodology. This is how you write it. Now, this is the structure of the typical methodology chapter. Now, I put typical within brackets because there is no such thing as typical. You can write it in a different way, and that is fine. But this is a safe approach, and this is a safe structure. I mean, this is usually what people do most of the time. So just take a quick look. Again, there is nothing to explain here. It is pretty straightforward. You can take a photo and you can replicate this in your thesis. It's absolutely fine at the undergraduate level, at the PhD level. When you write a journal article, it's more or less the same. All right. And these are the next the next two slides, I'm nearly done. The next two slides are a series of questions that you ask yourself to make sure you have addressed everything that needs to be addressed in the study design or research design chapter. Just take a look at this. I won't explain it. It is just a checklist. And it is actually in the exact sequence in which they should be answered. So again, you can take a photo or you can have a copy of this presentation and you can use it in your writing, just a checklist of questions. And here's the other one. So as you can see, things like ethical issues, researcher positioning, these are usually towards the end of the chapter, not at the beginning, towards the end of the chapter, very important. Okay, so just summarizing, again, just summarizing this section, and then we'll just look at the language issues and then we are done. So first is understanding. So if you think about, you have interviewed 5 students, you have transcribed, you have recorded, you have taken the interviews, you've recorded the interviews, and then you have transcribed them. So you've written them down. How do you actually, what's the order of things in order to conduct your methodology? First, you understand them. You know, it's simply like what they are saying without analyzing, okay, this is what he meant, this is what she meant. Analysis is where you actually start analyzing and try to make connections. And then you evaluate. Evaluate is where you become critical. You don't accept everything. You draw inferences. You draw hypothetical positions. You draw different kinds of interpretations based on what students, your participants say. And then you synthesize. Now, synthesis means you have 3 or 4 or 5 different themes from your findings. If you present these 3 or 4 or 5 themes separately, you can present them separately in the discussion in the analysis chapter. But if you don't synthesize them, then there is nothing you can say in the discussion chapter, because the discussion chapter, which is the melting pot chapter, is where everything has to come together. And then finally you express, which is talking about implications. And you can do that in the discussion chapter as well as in the conclusion chapter. So now this is the last part. And again, I won't spend too much time, but when you are actually writing the chapter, because if you look at the title of today's public lecture, it is Writing a Research Design for University Students. So it is not just understanding, it's about writing. So when it comes to writing, it is not just about ontology, epistemology, theoretical framework, methods, methodology. It's also the mechanics and the practicalities of expressing, which is the last point here, expression. Okay. So now we are looking at some of the language issues that you need to keep in mind in order to write a beautiful research design chapter. So one of the most common mistakes done by students is they say things like, it has therefore been proved that, or it can be concluded that. Now, natural science researchers can say that because they use experiments, they use chemical experiments or physics experiments or observations or things like that. In social sciences, in Hess, what you see is not what you get, right? So instead of saying it has therefore been proved that, it can be concluded that, we need to say it is possible that, it is likely that, it appears that, evidence suggests that. So we have to use this language. So this is called hedging, non-committal statements, and we need to be careful about using this kind of language in the methodology section and in the subsequent sections, which is analysis and discussion. Now, it's not really about grammar, because you can all use this kind of language. Anyone can use it. You can all do it. It's very easy. But it's about being aware of using this kind of language. So don't say we can prove that or we have proven that. What else do we have? So the next 3 slides, the next 1, 2, 3, 4 slides are common problems. I want you to take a quick look. You can take a photo. I won't explain them, but these are all to do with writing and writing the research design chapter in particular. Just take a look at some of these. And as long as you can use this as another checklist, as long as you can avoid it, you will have a beautiful study design chapter in your thesis. So saying like everyone knows that, not necessarily. In these times of rapid change, this is a cliche. Don't use this kind of extensions. These are just examples. And finally, this is the last slide on common problems. Simple summaries of literature with no synthesis. As I said, you need a synthesis. If there is no synthesis, it's like I have 5 findings, and therefore I have 5 statements, and therefore I have 5 points in my discussion. But what brings everything together? It is still part of one thesis. It is still part of one study. So you have to synthesize. And another one is not making their own voice come through. Oh, that's another one. So yeah, we had another. So common problems, cultural insensitivity is another thing, and then referencing and all of that. These are kind of obvious things to note. And the last 2 slides are on some of the suggestions for some of the phrasing that you can use. Again, it's not about grammar. You all know how to use this, but the question is, do you actually use this in your writing? Maybe not. So you can use it as another checklist. These are for logical argument, and these are for counter argument. Some of them are very obvious, but again, if you look at your writing, you might be surprised that you actually never use the very important term nevertheless. Maybe you just say but you never say nevertheless. Maybe you didn't realize that. So it is good. And my last slide here is just a food for thought. And I want to make a very important point before I finish. So let me read it out and then I'll tell you what it means. And this is from Hamilton. In practice, I suggest research is always a fumbling act of discovery. Fumbling means you're almost tripping over, you're falling, you're just falling. Where researchers only know what they are doing when they have done it, past tense, and only know what they are looking for after they have found it, not while, not before. Put another way, it is only after the event, when they have finished their thesis, article, or reports, or proposal, that researchers can maintain they had a good quality and well-framed research question. So this means that your methodology is an organic part of your thesis. It will grow and develop not only when you're collecting data, but also when you're analyzing data. When you're writing your methodology chapter, you cannot decide on a methodology and study design and set it in stone and say, I will follow it blindly. That is not possible, and that is not desirable. Our methodology or study design has to evolve hand in hand with our data collection, and it will keep on changing as we keep on writing, and that's not a problem. There is no problem with that. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone. Pamela, I'm done. So just thank you.
Yeah, okay, test. Am I audible? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Akib. Now we will start the questions and answer session. So for the first Q&A session, please raise your hand by clicking the appropriate button in the platform or in the Zoom. And please wait for me to utter your name first before you delivering your question, please. So 3 questions from 3 participants first, or you may type it also in the chat box. Okay, so for the first Q&A session, 3 questions from 3 participants. You can raise your hand by clicking the appropriate button in the Zoom platform, or you can type it on the chat box. Any questions? Okay, please don't be ashamed. You can ask as many questions as possible. And I know that Dr. Akib will be more than gladly to answer all the questions from you. Any questions, everyone? Okay, Evan, are you going to ask the questions to our speaker? Any questions?
Well, they are still preparing their questions, I believe. Okay, so if I may start with the question. Yeah, Dr. Rakib, if I may ask you, as I know that students here are really, reluctant to express their own voice. And it might be influenced by the culture here that students cannot argue or students cannot debate. So it's really hard for us as a lecturer to push them to state their own view. Do you have any suggestion for us as a lecturer in order to push or to encourage our students to be able to express their own view? Thank you.
Maya, thank you very much. Now, I'll just start by saying that when Maya was my PhD student at Monash University, she was also very shy. She was also very, very respectful. But when she asked questions, she used to ask very good questions, very, very good questions. So I've been to Indonesia many times. Indonesia is my absolutely most favorite country for visiting. And right now in Australia, we don't have any flights coming in or going out. But guess which country I will visit once the flights are back? Absolutely, it will be in Indonesia. And I have beautiful memories of being in Manado 2 years ago, and we went with Donald and Golda and Maya and others. We went to Lake Lino, we went to Tomohon and all of that. So what I'm saying is I am familiar with the food, but also the culture of Indonesia, which is fantastic. But one part of that culture is that students are shy, especially with a lecturer who is new or a lecturer who is from overseas, English-speaking lecturer. I know there is a cultural element here, but I also know that since the beginning of last year, students from all over the world have found a new channel to voice their questions, and that is through digital platforms such as Zoom. And until the beginning of last year, many students never had an online webinar. Many students never had a class online through Zoom, but now you have an opportunity. If you feel shy, you can just type in your question in the question box. But other than that, Maya knows I'm a very easygoing person, and I would love you to ask me any questions. If you don't have any questions, you can also give me some suggestions or some comments on some of the things that I have said, because this is an opportunity for us to learn from each other. It's not just me telling you, but also just, it's a platform for shared discussion. So any comments, most welcome. I think there are some questions in the chat box, but they are in Bahasa, so I can't read it. There's something about WhatsApp. Maybe it's not a question, I'm not sure.
There's question from Rangga Johan, Doctor. Okay, Rangga, you may deliver your question.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So, greetings for Dr. Rakib, and thank you for the presentation today. And I would like to ask a question, and actually, I think this is a personal question, my personal problem in making a research design. So, my supervisor always give a suggestion about how to make my grammatical sentence better, and also it have a constructive problem with my own personal thinking, that when I think, I just write it straightly without trying to re-edit the sentence that I'm trying to put or type. So do you have any tips that after I'm trying to rethink again about what I'm trying to type, or even the grammatical mistakes, so I don't do it just directly what I'm thinking, just put it entirely. So it could be complicated, or even it's too overwhelming for people, so it's not a direct statement. So yeah,
Yes.
sometimes not all people, especially for the topics that I write, could understand it easily. So do you have any personal tips or something? Thank you.
Thank you, Ranga. Very good question. First of all, is your supervisor here?
You can say so.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. So therefore, I have to say my first advice is listen to your supervisor. He knows you better than I do, right? Because he's your supervisor. Just like I know Maya better than many people here. Your supervisor knows you better, Ranga. So listen to the advice of your supervisor. However, my advice is, there is something beautiful about the spontaneity of writing. So when I say spontaneity, it means when you have the flow of writing, you should just write as if you're on fire. You should write as much as you can without worrying about grammar, without worrying about spelling, without worrying about citations, without worrying about structure, even spelling, especially if you're doing it in a foreign language such as English. So the first draft, when you first write something, whether it is your methodology or literature review or discussion, write it spontaneously without worrying about anyone reading it, without worrying about making any mistakes, as much as you can, for as long as you can, and as comfortably as you can. That's the first thing, because your innermost feelings, your deepest convictions, and your most prominent concerns will come out in your writing only when you are 100% relaxed, without worrying about your supervisor. And then you can refine it later on by looking at grammar and spelling and structure and citations and paraphrasing and everything else, all the mechanics of writing that I mentioned. But the first time when you write it, don't think about anything, just free flow of writing. If you don't do that immediately, that spontaneity might be lost because you are being so conscious about making it nice and correct and suitable for your supervisor that those thoughts will leave your head and they will never return again. So the first time you do any kind of writing, and this advice is for Ranga, but for everyone, please do it as honestly and as relaxingly as you can without worrying about anything at all. Capturing that flow is important. And I'll give you another tip. If you are interviewing someone for your thesis, obviously you're recording it on your phone or on an audio device, you're recording it and you're thinking, okay, I will go back home, I'll listen to it tomorrow, day after, and then I will transcribe it. Yes, but it would be really good if you can write a few paragraphs of reflections immediately after the introduction, immediately after the interview, for the same reason, which is it will be very spontaneous, otherwise you will forget it. So that is my advice, Ranga. Number one, trust your supervisor. Number two, don't be afraid. Write as much as you can, as immediately as possible, even if it's like an odd time. It's like you are probably lying in bed, but you have a nice idea, just write it down. Don't worry about grammar. I hope that helps, Ranga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rakib. Here's another question from Olivia Pratiwi. She typed it on the chat box. So the question is, I want to know how to handle our emotion when we give up to write our research. I need your suggestions, sir. Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, thank you, Olivia. Now, I know that is a very funny question, but I commend you and I admire you for asking this funny question, knowing that everyone else might be laughing at you or they might be thinking it's a silly question or it's an uncomfortable question, but I really commend you. I appreciate that you have asked this question because this is a very common concern for anyone who's writing a PhD thesis or undergraduate thesis or master's thesis. The question is, I want to know how to handle our emotion when we give up to write our research. I need your suggestion. Okay, again, if you feel too much pressure, if you feel writer's block, if you feel like you can't write, there are two approaches here. One is be kind to yourself. You know, like as I was telling Ranga, you know, space out, give yourself a break. Say that, okay, I won't study for one day. I'll take a short break. I'll come back to it. I will be kind to myself, etc. That is one approach. And that is the more common approach, like being kind to yourself. My approach is the opposite. My approach is, if you feel that you are not productive, you are trying to avoid certain things, not necessarily out of procrastination, but because you know you eventually have to do it, but you don't want to do it today. So the second approach is to do it immediately, to get out of the comfort zone, to be a bit more or less comfortable, to be more uncomfortable with it, and to really push yourself, and without thinking much about the consequences. And I think that is one of the ways of handling your emotion. The other approach I would suggest is to work in a group. So if you are alone, whether it is at home on Zoom or in the library or on campus, you will draw a lot of positive energy. If you work with other classmates, if you work with other friends, even if they are doing their own project and it's on a different topic and they don't care about what you're writing, just the physical aspect of sitting together will give you that sense like I am not alone. so you can draw your energy from others, and you will feel less negative emotion if you're not alone, if you're working with others. So that's my other tip. And the final tip that I will give, and again, this is not just for Olivia, this is for everyone, handling emotion. Today, everyone has a mobile phone, and we always go to our mobile phone every 5 to 7 minutes to check text messages or something. Okay, it's natural. I'm not asking you to give up your phone. I'm not asking you to power off your phone. I'm not asking you to put your phone in a drawer and lock it. I'm not asking you to turn off Wi-Fi. No, because that is a weakness. The real strength is you will have your phone in front of you, but you will not pick it up every 5-10 minutes. That's the real strength. If you turn it off, turn off Wi-Fi, or put your phone in a different room just to force yourself, that is not strength, that is weakness. The real strength is it is in front of you, but you're not touching it. And believe me, you can all do it. You can all do it, because psychologists say that everyone has an attention span. Some have 5 minutes, some have 13 minutes, some have 14 minutes. It's like a cycle. So after every 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 13 minutes, right, we need a break. You either pick up your phone, or you have a glass of water, or you take a selfie, or you have to do something, right? It's like a cycle. And there is actually a scientific test that can measure how long your attention span is. Now, attention span is not a bad thing, but a short attention span is a bad thing, because it distracts you and it chops off your time, and you cannot work continuously at a stretch. So you have to train the mind that you will have all the distractions in front of you. You will have people talking in front of you. You will have your phone, you'll have your Facebook, you'll have music or whatever, but you will say, it doesn't matter. I'm in my zone and I can concentrate. So it is about the confidence that comes from inside you. And it is also about some of the practice that you need to believe in yourself. Olivia, I hope this helps.
Thank you, Dr. Rakib. Now we have another question in the chat box from Wenty Marcelino. His question is, hello, Sir Rakib. My question is, as student, how we can write a good citation of theories? Thank you.
I'm just trying to find the question. Okay, I got it. How can you write a good citation of theories? I'm not sure about the question. Winty, can you explain or paraphrase it, Winty? Don't be shy. You can just ask your question. How can we write a good citation of theories? I'm just trying to understand the question. Winty? Or can someone paraphrase it for me? Maya, do you know what she's asking? Maybe?
Maybe he wants to ask about how to cite theory from from reading from books or from articles, and then cite the theory to his own article or research design.
Okay, so I think the answer, if I get it correct, Maya and Wenty, the answer is just follow whatever style is recommended by your institute. So for example, at Monash, APA 7th, and at Samratulangi, maybe it's the same, APA 6th or 7th. Now, APA is not just about in-text citation and referencing. APA, many people don't know that APA is also about stylistics. So it's also about how to construct sentences. So if I can just share this once again for just 1 minute. Winty, this is for you. Take a look at this. Sorry, this one here. Take a look at this. So this is not really about citation. it is really about synthesizing your own voice with the voice of other authors and theorists and other researchers, and how you can synthesize these two together. So in order to do that, if you can follow APA, it will give you a lot of types of examples of how to use discourse markers, transitional markers, advanced organizers, rhetorical devices to make connections between one paragraph and another paragraph, one section, another section, cross-referencing between one chapter and another chapter to enhance the readability of your thesis. So I hope this helps, Binti. Pamela?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for all the questions that already been given to our notable speaker. Now we enter the second Q&A session. So to all the participants, if you have any questions or comments towards Dr. Akib, please.
Pamela, I just want to mention that I will make this PowerPoint and the article available to everyone. I will email it to Donald and Maya, and they can share it with everyone in this group. Thank you.
Very much, Doctor. So any questions? Any other question? To all the participants, any questions? This is a very great opportunity actually to ask questions. So if you have any questions, you may raise your hand by clicking the appropriate button. Or you can just type it into the chat box. Rangga, please unmute first.
Okay, thank you. So first I would like to thank you, Dr. Akib, of course, for your suggestion first. And for now, I think it's a representative question for a common of my friends that actually it's a contrastive position for me, because I do realize that some other people that told me that they have problem with something they want to express, but they just like to afraid or stuck, unlike me that just write it directly, or some kind of other people, especially from literature students and this faculty, they just love to write it directly about what they're thinking, and you already gave tips about it. But for the other students, they just like afraid to express their opinion or what they think, but they know actually what they want to say. Just it's just some kind of stuck in their head with a focusing on appropriate grammar or the structure of text, but they still cannot express it on their text. What do you think happened actually? So make them just like so difficult? It's just there because they don't want to do it, or there's something like another reason behind it. So it's a contrastive position from me, right? So do you get it, doctor? I think.
Yes, yeah, Ranga, I think I know what you're talking about. So, and what you're talking about is quite common. I see that very often among my master students and PhD students. It's quite common, and it's not even cultural. It's not a cultural issue. It's a human behavior thing. It's not something to do with Indonesia. It is not like what you've described is common in Indonesia, not common in Australia. No, it's not like that. It is common everywhere. Sometimes it happens because of procrastination, but sometimes it also happens because the human brain doesn't perform the same all the time. So if it is a case of writer's block, Ranga, like I have some ideas, but it's not coming out, right? Yes, I have some ideas in my head. It's not coming out. I can't write. What I would do is I would take my phone and I would record my voice in Bahasa Indonesia. It doesn't matter, or Minahasa language, whatever your first language is, the one that I feel most comfortable with. I would just talk to myself, reflections about the ideas that I have in my head, because they are there, but I can't write it. I'll just talk in my first language, or in English, or in Bahasa. I'll just record myself, talking to myself. I would even say things like, I don't understand, maybe this is what I want to say, maybe that is what I want to. And then later on, I would play back the audio, and you would be surprised how much gem you can get from that audio, because that is your pure spontaneous thoughts from your head. All you have to do is transcribe certain parts of that recording, and you will see that a lot of what you wanted to say, but you couldn't write, it just comes from your recording. So in other words, if you can't write, speak. If you can't speak to someone else, speak to yourself. So maybe that's one way of capturing your ideas, Ranga.
We have next. Thank you, doctor. We have the next question from Enda Pratiwi. The question is, excuse me, sir, I'm Enda Pratiwi from 10 November Institute, Surabaya. My question is how to avoid the plagiarism. So, Enda's question is how to avoid plagiarism, doctor.
Okay, thank you, Enda from Surabaya. I can explain this in a very detailed way, but it might take a long time, but I will say two things to avoid plagiarism. Two things. One is you have to know citation and referencing very, very well. That's the first thing to avoid plagiarism. The second thing is you must be very good with summarizing and paraphrasing. Summarizing and paraphrasing skills are the most important skills that will save you from plagiarizing. And thirdly, if you plagiarize, you are the one who knows better than anyone else, before anyone accuses you of plagiarism, whether you're plagiarizing or not. You're the one who knows the best. But sometimes you might not know enough. It means maybe it's not a deliberate act, it's happening. The only way of knowing whether you are plagiarizing or not is to know about APA referencing and to know how to correctly paraphrase and summarize. There is no shortcut. That's the only way of knowing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rakib, for all the answers. And everyone, this is the end of our Q&A session. Once again, I would like to deliver our thankfulness to our notable speaker, Dr. Rakib Kauduri. Thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge here to all of us, and we wish you all the best for your future endeavors, Doctor. And for all the participants who actively and enthusiastically participate in asking questions and in the discussion today, thank you very much. Now go back to the MC. Miss Adele, please.
Thank you for a very interesting material from Dr. Rakib Kauduri. And now we're going to hear closing remark from Ms. Stephanie Sigarlaki. The floor is yours, ma'am, please.
Thank you very much, Graciela. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The Honorable Speaker, Dr. Rakib Chaudhuri from Monash University, the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Andes Ferry Raymond Mavkere, MA, and the Vice Dean of Academic Affairs, Ibu Maya Waro, PhD, the outstanding participants that mostly university students from Faculty of Faculty of Humanities, Sambatullah University, as well as from other universities, and the beloved lecturers from Faculty of Humanities. First and foremost, I would like to say, or I would like to praise the merciful God for His amazing grace, so that we could hold these public lectures from Dr. Rakib Chaudhuri today. And I'm very confident to say that all the participants would not regret, yeah, or I bet they are very happy and lucky that they have spent the 2 hours, yeah, with Dr. Rakib in this public lecture. I believe that they have got many valuable, remarkable material from the speaker, that is the expert of the writing research design. Yeah, we know that Dr. Rakib once have been here in the Pasca Sarjana, and he also gave us a public lecture as well in writing. So we are very lucky to can have Dr. Rakib again this time in this public lecture. So for that reason, once again, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Rakib Chaudhuri as the speaker of this public lecture today. And hopefully all the students can learn from this public lecture about the writing of research design. Yeah, seemingly that many of our students are very shy, so they cannot express, or they cannot ask their questions. I know they must have many questions, but yeah, that's our yeah, probably they very shy to say to this occasion. But I think Dr. Chaudhuri can have or can share Facebook account to other students, so they can have contact with Dr. Rakib Chaudhuri. They can ask questions directly to Dr. Chaudhuri. All right. So once again, on behalf of our dean, the dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Andes Perry Raymond Mawikere, MA, and the vice deans, also the members and the head of the committee. I'd like to say our sincere gratitude to the speaker today, Dr. Raket Chaudhuri. Hopefully, we can have other time, yeah, occasion to have another public lecture on other material. So once again, thank you very much. And I give this back to the Graciela.
So thank you, ma'am. And once again, I would like to say thank you for Dr. Akif because it was very interesting. And now we almost reached the end of this public lecture and we'll have the photo session. And for all the participants here, can you please turn on your camera? And for the operator, can you please take the screen capture for our public lecture today?
Tell us when to smile.
Okay, Algaras. So please turn on your camera, all of you. So for the first slide. Okay, wait a moment for my network. Still.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. It seems that the operator now facing technical difficulties. So I'm going to do the photo session. Please turn on your camera. This is the first slide. Everyone, please turn on your camera. Okay, slide 1. 1, 2, 3. Now move to slide 2. Okay, focus everyone, smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now slide 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, slide 4. 1, 2, 3. Next, slide 5. Okay, everyone, please turn on your camera. Now I'm going to capture slide 5. 1, 2, 3. Slide 6. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next, slide 7. Please turn on your camera. 2, 3. Okay, now slide 8. Please turn on your camera, everyone. Now in slide 9. Last slide 10. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're done with the photo session. Thank you very much, everyone. Now, back to the MC. Ms. Adel, please.
Okay, so we already reached the end of our public lecture today, and thank you so much for all the participants who already joined with us today. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, have a good day.
Rakib, thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Maya. So good to see you, Dr. Maya Waro. I want to see you back
Good
at
to see you
Monash once again.
too.
Please come to visit
I
us,
hope
Maya.
so. I hope so.
Donald, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Dr. Ferry, thank you. Thank you, Pamela and Stephanie and everyone else. It was
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I hope to see you on campus in Manado once again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are really
Waiting for you.
waiting
Thank you,
for
Donald.
Yeah.
I've left my Instagram account, so if you want to follow me, you can. It's on the chat box.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We
Thank
really
you, Donald.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank
See
you
you,
again on
Stephanie.
behalf of the committee.
So students,